I thought we would get back to work on our hammerheads that we started in last week's video. And the problem with these is that the eyes are kind of crooked and there's a little bit of rag on the inside. And I think the easiest and quickest way to repair that at this point is with a carbide burr on a die grinder. Now, while these are really fast and efficient to grind with, they are also brittle and they would be easy to break, so make sure you have eye protection on. They're noisy, wear ear protection, and there's all sorts of super fine shavings coming off that you don't want to breathe. So respiratory protection is another really good idea when you're working with something like this. Additionally, these things aren't cheap. I don't remember exactly what I paid for this burr, but it's probably more than the steel for the hammer cost. I've tried just hand filing these, and while that's certainly an option, it takes a really long time, and it would take me less time to throw this in the scrap heap and start all over again. So I'm going to stick with the burr. You've really pretty much seen everything I can show you about this. It's just a matter of keeping it straight and even and not letting it jerk in there to catch the burr, because that's the kind of thing that breaks them. So it's just go slow, take it easy, cut off little bits, take it out of the vise, look at it, see what it needs. The eye is starting to straighten up in some of the areas, but I still have a whole bunch of rag back up in here that I need to get out. So I'm going to keep working on this and then work from both directions to keep everything straight. If you've got your angle grinder angled, you might be putting twist in the eye from a different perspective than what you're trying to take out. And once I'm done with this, we'll go back to the forge, we'll heat it up, we'll drift it, we'll try to refine the eye and the overall shape a little bit. We may have to thin it out, and we may end up cutting it smaller because this is getting a little long. I'm starting to regret drawing that bar out. This isn't a bad cross-sectional dimension for a hammer, but it's getting to be a little bit long for a cross peen of this weight, so we'll probably end up trimming it. We may end up with more like a 2 1/4 pound hammer when we're all done. I'm pretty happy with the eye on our hammer now. It's symmetrical. I don't want to make it any bigger than it is right now. It's going to fit the handles I have pretty much exactly, and I don't want to have to worry about it being too large. So I'm going to try real hard not to stretch it as I drift it. All we really want to do is just the final cleanup, make sure it's not twisted, and it's really just the right size. And we're just going to use a regular hammer eye drift. And this goes almost all the way in, so that might be a problem. I think what we'll do to start is put it in most of the way, probably turn it around and hold it this way. And I'm going to try and upset the hammer back down, hopefully upsetting these walls a little bit. And I'm going to go back and forth with that a little bit. In the ideal situation, we're going to increase the thickness of the web, or the width of the web, so it comes out to where the hammer is. I don't think that's really going to happen, but if we can get that to work, that'll be ideal. Now, all is not lost if my eye ends up bigger than the handle I have. I can always make a handle for these hammerheads, but I do prefer to just use store-bought handles. In the shop, sometimes you don't want to take several hours to make a new handle when you can just have a box full of stock handles ready to go. Knock the old broken handle off, put the new one in, back to work. So I'm just going to drop that drift in there. I'm not going to drive it because I don't want to stretch anything. Stand it up on the anvil, and it'll rock a little bit, so get it under control each time you hit it. But the drift will keep that eye from collapsing in on itself. It may deform a little bit, but in the final steps we will be able to work with that. And that does look like it's expanding a little bit. You say it's not completely even, but that drift's going to get hot, so you won't be able to grab it with your hand here in the next heat. I'm going to drop this drift in from the opposite side this time. It helps keep things a little bit even, we hope. A lot of fumbling. Luckily the hammerhead stays hot for quite a while. You see that's rounding out quite a bit there, and that's good. That's interesting. Managed to get it stuck. That'll need to be hotter. I'm going to take this heat to just straighten that out, get the eye under control. And this works pretty well without the drift in it. If you've got the drift in at this point, you're actually drawing out between the hammer and the drift. And my goal here is to make the eye slightly smaller than it was. I think we're achieving that. And I've been swinging this 4.4 pound hammer that in the last video I told you I almost never swing like this. But it seems to be the right hammer for this job. I think I want to go from this side. And that's already starting to tighten up around that drift, so that's good. That means we are, in fact, upsetting the edges and making the eye smaller. To some degree, anyways. Also upsetting the hammer back a little bit. It's flaring out in the front, which might be an interesting look. Was not what I was going for, but I don't really mind the way it's starting to look. We're definitely going to have to straighten the peen out. It's kind of gone crooked. We might do that in the next heat here. These hammers actually ended up around 3 pounds, so even if we lose a little bit by trimming the face off, we won't be too bad. A little bit more work to do around the eye there. Now, I can't actually draw the peen out right up to the eye with that other pair of tongs because they're kind of in the way, so I'll go to these. And that will probably upset into the eye just a little bit. And that's just something we'll deal with. Might go back to the die grinder. And I'm switching back to a more normal size hammer. None of this stuff's worth giving yourself tendonitis for. So if you need to swing a lighter hammer, swing a lighter hammer. There'll also be a fair amount of grinding to do later. That's really looking a lot better. A little bit of imperfection I see might get fixed with a grinder. So I think it's back to the drift. We might be ready to actually do the final drifting. I'm going to drift from both sides ultimately. And again, I'm not going to do much forging because I don't want to stretch that. Straighten it out a little bit maybe. And I'm forging just from this side because it's a little thicker. The other side cools off faster next to the anvil, and most of the blow of the hammer is absorbed on this side. And that helps even things out a little bit. I think this is also crooked in here, you can see, so that I'll fix with the die grinder before we do the handle and before we harden and temper. We'll do all that again from this side. Now, the only thing left to do is decide where I want to put my touch mark on here. Even though I don't touch mark everything I make, I think a hammer for a giveaway should have a touch mark. I think I'm going to put it on the top of the hammer. Put it in good and deep because I'll probably do some grinding on this before all is said and done. I'm going to give it a real quick wire brushing, and then we're going to put it right back in the bucket of vermiculite to slow cool. Now, I really suspect I'm going to need to do a little bit more work with the die grinder and the carbide burr, which is why I'm annealing that instead of just normalizing it. And I think we're going to end up saving this hammer. It looks way better to me today than it did the other day. And that means we should be able to save both of these, but I don't need to show those same steps twice. If you want to see what it looks like to fix the other hammer, just rewind the video and start back right at the beginning. But I am going to go ahead and fix both of them. I think this is going to work out fine. But the question is it worth taking the time to fix these, or is it better just to start over? Well, I have a couple of thoughts on that. Time-wise, yeah, it's probably going to be pretty close to the same amount of time to do the repairs on these as it would have to just start from scratch, do the whole thing over again. And that does save me the cost of the materials, but it also involves tools that some people don't have. Like I say, you can do this with a big round file, big half-inch round file, but that's going to be a huge amount of work. The carbide burr, the die grinder make it pretty easy, but not everybody has a die grinder, and carbide burrs can be kind of expensive. So from that point of view, maybe starting over might be the way to go. And certainly just always fixing things that go wrong isn't always going to be the best, because sometimes it's never quite going to be right. Whatever went wrong is always going to be there, and it might not be savable, and you need to sort of develop a feel for what it takes to fix something versus when should you scrap it and start over. And that's the best argument for taking the time to fix these, is this teaches you, was it worth the trouble? And when we're all done, we might say that wasn't worth it at all because something else happened and the eye is still a little bit off and it doesn't swing straight because the handle doesn't fit right. Or whatever the case is, you might decide it wasn't worth the trouble to fix the hammers. But then then you've learned something from that. Additionally, when you take the time to fix things, you often get a better feel for what it would have taken to not have the problem go wrong in the first place. And I can tell you now pretty much exactly why these eyes went off. This punch that I was using is round on the end, but it wasn't made from a round bar. And there's still some flats up here on the side and front and back, and that means that it's going to create sort of a square with rounded corners. And because I was punching at a 45-degree angle, which is really nice and comfortable to work at, that means when I got up into this part with the flat, I was putting a flat profile on the diamond in here, and that's really what threw that off. It would have been much better of me to stay in line with the hammer or at perfect 90, although perfect 90 does create problems when you need to knock the punch loose because now you're trying to work this under the power hammer dies this way. So my preference for tools that need to be lined up is to make the handle right in line with the piece you're working. It's a lot easier to judge straight and parallel than it is to judge 90, and 90 would be easier to judge than 45. I've made tools at a 45-degree angle, and it seems like they are always hard to steer, hard to keep lined up. So my preference is to make them this way if I'm going to do that. So the next time I use this round punch, and I may make a third hammer just for the sake of trying this out, I'll make sure that I do it in line. And it's just simple things like that are often the thing that sabotages you. It's just a real simple thing that if you stopped to think about it and looked at the punch and said, oh, that might cause a problem, you won't do it that way, and it's not a problem then. So I do hope all that makes sense. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you haven't done so already, I would love it if you hit that subscribe button. Feel free to stick around, watch a few of the other videos, share the videos with your friends. If you'd like to provide financial support for the videos here at Black Bear Forge, there are links in the video description for both PayPal and Patreon. Those are merely donations. The content is free. Then I hope you have time in your day to get out to your shop, make something, but stay safe, wear your safety glasses, and we will see you for the next one.